Bad news for President Trump. The United Nations nuclear watchdog chief has dealt a brutal blow to the White House's claims about the damages of the United States' strikes on Iran. Director General Rafael Grossi says American B-2 bombers did not completely and totally obliterate Iran's nuclear program. He went so far as to say that Iran could start enriching uranium for a bomb within months.
The White House continues to maintain that Iran's nuclear program has been decimated. Meanwhile, Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo pressed Trump on the strikes over the weekend. Let's watch.
Do you think that the Iran regime hid some of the enriched uranium before the strikes?
No. You mean, did they take it out of the deep one? No.
Because you were pretty clear you can't have a weapon. You're going to have to come to the talk. Something's going to happen.
I don't think they did. No, I think, first of all, it's very hard to do. It's very dangerous to do.
Because I saw reports that there were 400 kilograms, 800 pounds that they moved, but I wonder if it's traceable. I mean, if they were to have moved,
they didn't move anything.
They didn't move anything.
You know what they moved themselves? They were all trying to live. They didn't move anything.
All right, well, it's hard for us as general consumers of the news to know exactly what's happened in Iran. We don't have access to the intelligence briefings. But I will say that if there is a credible source of information, it's the IAEA. It's, that's where I'm getting my information, and I would take what the Director General is saying there seriously. But I think the bigger point here is that you can't bomb knowledge. This is a capacity, a capability that Iran has been developing for some time, and so clearly some destruction happened. It's very likely that they delayed Iran's nuclear capability, but almost surely they're going to be rebuilding it or transferring it to another area, which is why, and this is what I hope the Trump administration is doing, is to engage now in negotiations and diplomacy. Because part of what happened is we previously had the Iran nuclear deal on the table that the Obama administration negotiated. They verifiably had been staying within those limits. According to the IAEA, they were, until 2018, Trump pulled out of it and they started enriching the nuclear capacity again. And so now here we are. I think based on how much they'd enriched uranium, there's very likely a good case for the bombings to have happened. But at the same time, that's not a long-term solution. There needs to be diplomacy now. There needs to be a new version, essentially, of the Iran nuclear deal if we're actually going to solve this problem. Now, Obama was able to do it without launching bombs in Iran. Now we had to. Let's hope there's a real deal on the table.
Yeah, I would love to see negotiations continue as well. And I think on this UN nuclear watchdog report, it's a little confusing because just a couple of days before this latest interview where he talks about the 3-month timeline for when Iran could start enriching uranium again, he gave an interview earlier where he talks about significant damage, saying that it's a fairly accurate technical conclusion that they could have set the nuclear program back perhaps decades. Depends on what activity you're talking about. It will be much more difficult for Iran to continue at the same pace as before, and these are all from the same Rafael Grossi. So I'm a little confused as to why he's giving two separate assessments. But that being said, I think most of the intelligence we've received has said that they were set back by probably a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, which seems most reasonable to me. Your point about the institutional knowledge is important because Israel, of course, followed up with strikes on a lot of the scientists. So the question is, how many did they get? Do they still have the ability to quickly ramp up this uranium production like they were doing before? But it was my understanding during the JCPOA that they were regularly violating the agreement and had been paying off inspectors. And I mean, all of that was publicly reported by American media. So I was a little confused by your claim there.
Yeah, no, I'm following what the IAEA is saying, and I think on top of that, what's happening right now is, to your point about what the Secretary General is saying, clearly there was damage done.
Right.
Clearly they're delayed. I think the time horizon you mentioned, 1 to 3 years, seems reasonable based on what we've seen in terms of the amount their nuclear capacity has been delayed. But at the same time, this sort of rhetoric that has been completely obliterated and destroyed, which is what he's pushing back against, is the Trump comments on that, also seems to make sense, because again, you can't bomb your way to a solution here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fordo was obliterated, but the nuclear program wasn't, because
Right.
they obviously had moved some of their uranium, and they have other sites available and whatnot, and so on and so forth. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, I mean, the negotiations are going to be the big thing here. And is Trump? I mean, one of the other elements of this is Israel, right? Is Trump going to be able to get Netanyahu to hold off while he attempts to resume negotiations, if he even decides to do that? Because he said last week that he has halted negotiations with Iran because of their some of the demands that they've been asking for. The fact that Khamenei has come out and said that Iran won the war. I mean,
Right.
that obviously rankled Trump a lot. So it's not even clear, actually, at this point, if they will, in the immediate at least, go back to the negotiating table, which to me is an issue.
Right. I think Trump has tried to achieve greater negotiating leverage by doing this bombing. He clearly wasn't happy with the terms of debate that were happening earlier. We'll find out maybe a few years from now whether or not this actually increases his negotiating position. But I also think the MAGA wing of the party that said we were supposed to be anti-war, that was like a huge part of Trump coming to power, attracting a number of independent voters. Meanwhile, you had Democrats embracing Liz and Dick Cheney in the last election, something I completely opposed. That's not the foreign policy that I've signed up for. But now you're seeing Trump potentially getting influenced by the military-industrial complex and having a more forceful military intervention policy. I mean, you heard Tulsi Gabbard, his intelligence chief, talk all the time about we're not supposed to be doing regime change wars. Trump was potentially inching in that direction. So I think that real fissure in the MAGA base is what's probably prompting Trump to say, all right, we've done the bombing, now we're going to negotiate. The other part that's not talked about in all of this is the public sentiment of Iranians, which is Iranians, I think, when you see this kind of bombing, you see this kind of attack, it's the kind of thing that can unite people against the United States. So strategically speaking, I think we have to be very careful, because the long-term vision here is to be able to normalize relations and bring Iran into the international community. This is not a war against the Iranian people, and ideally you want to be able to build those bridges in the future. The more bombing, the more military intervention we do, the less chance we have of that happening.
Yeah, I think most of the non-interventionist MAGA base would be happy if the bombing was all that happened and he was able to use that as leverage to get a significant deal done with Iran. But what they don't want to see, of course, is either boots on the ground or regime change. And when either Trump or Netanyahu talks publicly about regime change, what that signals to most Americans is we're going to be the ones cleaning up the mess.
Right.
And we're going to be the ones there for decades trying to restore peace to the area. That's what the base is really against.
Right. Well, as Trump always says, thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, we have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising. Stick around. That's right after this.